Hey everybody, welcome to The Drop. We are here for an NHL free agency special. You can find us on the NHL and ESPN podcast feed, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can stream the show on the NHL on ESPN YouTube channel, as so many of you did during the playoffs, and we thank you for that. Arda's not here. Arda is taking a well-deserved vacation. We wish him well. We miss him. But we got to talk about free agency and the news of the day in the National Hockey League. And to do so, we're bringing on two big brains. We're bringing on Dan Powers of the Empty Netters podcast and Rachel Doerrie of ESPN, our draft guru, to break down winners, losers, and some shocking news on July 1st. Here's Dan. All right, joining us now, Dan Powers. You know him as one half of the Empty Netters podcast. And now you know him as a hockey insider.
How about that? How about
You're
that?
breaking news left and right during free agency, sir.
Dipping my toe into the insider pool, and I gotta say, I like the waters. It's nice in here.
Every so often, a new insider emerges. You know, like Shayna Goldman was breaking trades one year, and Mike Commodore became like an insider one time, and now it's you. Now you are a guy. Like, if you wanted to go and spin off your own rumor site now, you could probably make some bank doing that.
It's always good to have options. You've taught me that. It's, just try to keep as many lines in the water as possible. And here we are. I do understand it gets a bit. You can get addicted to it. It's fun. It's fun keeping the ear to the ground and hearing what's going on and who's going where. It's a lot of action. And today was insane.
That's right. The action is the juice, as they said in Heat.
Exactly.
I think that's how it was, right? It wasn't the juice. The juice. The action is the juice. That's right. Let's talk about one of the things that you helped bring to light, which was Patrick Kane going back to the Detroit Red Wings on a 1-year, $4 million contract. What is it about? Like, it didn't appear like Kane and the Red Wings were going to happen again. It looked like he might find himself elsewhere, but all roads lead back to Motown, I guess. Why do you think that went the way it did?
At the end of last season, I thought he looked so good with the team. He was buzzing. He had a couple shootout wins for the boys, and I thought it was a great fit. But when the season ended and he posted that goodbye and a thank you to Red Wings fans, that was a shock to me, because I was like, oh my God, he's waving goodbye. He's saying thanks for the quick trip and I'm headed elsewhere. And then all we were hearing the last week or so was New York, New York, New York, which I also thought was a surprise. I didn't think him going back to the Rangers made sense to me at all. I thought it's a better fit in Detroit. And then at the 11th hour, it did sort of feel like, after everything we'd heard about the Rangers, no, it was Detroit. And for me, I think it's all about the situational fit. Could you plug Kane on that line with Kreider and Ziba? Yeah, sure, you could. But I think he loves playing with DeBrincat. I think he's got a good thing going in with Larkin. He fits in that system. He clearly excelled. And I like the fact that he was like, you know what? I started something here. Let's do one more year, get this team into the playoffs. It just, to me, him in Detroit, strangely enough, makes more sense than him in New York right now for me.
Yeah, and I feel like there was a certain sense of unfinished business with the Rangers because he wasn't healthy when he played with them. Like, that was pre-surgery. And so I got the idea of, like, go finish what you started there as well. But like you said, I mean, there's something poetic about the Red Wings being the team that bet on him and gave him a chance, the whole thing. I'm a little surprised, though, it's back on a 1-year term. I thought that one of the things that him and his agent were looking for was to get a little multi-year deal out of this summer. But I don't know, I guess a player of his age and whatever, you can't get that. But
yeah, it's interesting. I honestly, I thought it was a typo, because I was waiting. I was like, wherever he goes, I thought it was going to be at least 3 years. I thought a 3-year deal was going to make sense.
Yeah.
It makes me wonder if he's playing the angle of, he gets a good amount of money in that 1-year contract. I wonder if he's thinking, if they're out of the playoffs come deadline, 1-year deal, easy to find a partner for him to get moved to. I would be surprised if he wants to move again, but that might be in the cards now.
Yeah. Of course, he was probably also thinking he was going to play with Steven Stamkos, which didn't happen, which brings us to our winners and losers of the 2024 NHL free agency. so far, day one. I don't will there even be a day two? It seemed like every damn person in the world signed a contract today.
Honestly, there's like top of my head, there's four people that I can think of that don't have one. But I mean, it's truly felt like everything happened today, didn't it? I
Yeah.
mean, last year there was a clear day one and day two with some still pretty big fish in day two. This was just an all-out frenzy of signings today. It was
Yeah, this
crazy.
is like day two is going to be the Capo Kakinen Derby, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, what are we
It's
doing?
it's it's Spronger and Kapanen. Like I don't even know who else is out there. It's crazy.
All right, who's your first big winner for free agent day?
You alluded to it. It has to be Nashville. I mean, Nashville came out of the woodwork today. Truly, I had eyes on a few people with Nashville. I knew that they were sniffing around Toffoli, maybe some other guys. And it started with I was hearing that Marchessault was going to Jersey. A lot of people were talking about that. And then bang, again, 11th hour, Nashville swoops in. And while that was being done, the major firework happens and Steven Stamkos signs a 4-year, $8 million contract with the Nashville Predators. And the fact that they pulled off those two and then add Brady Shea onto it. So they bring in two huge wingers and then they bring in a huge defenseman, all on big deals. I mean, it's crazy. And then it was sort of like under the cover of darkness. They also signed Scott Wedgwood after they extended UC Saros. So now an Askarov trade is probably coming, which is going to fetch a decent return, I would imagine. So I don't know how you can't say that the Nashville Predators are the winners of today. Barry Trotz stepped into this GM role, made a lot of big splashes last year with some buyouts on Joey and Duchesne, and he's really making his mark of what he wants from this team. And now he does this day one of free agency this year. I mean, they're buzzing. They're a completely different looking team.
Yeah. So I had heard Stamkos in Nashville going back to March, right? Like I had
Yeah.
heard if he does leave, Nashville could be a spot. And it makes sense.
Yeah.
Like it's the same kind of media market as Tampa. It's the same kind
Yep.
of income tax benefit as Tampa.
Yep.
It's a team on the come up. I think he looks really good in a cowboy hat, as we saw at that outdoor game. It's all there. It makes sense. Um, what you didn't anticipate on that Marchessault thing was that they were going to Solani in Korea this thing, where like Marchessault
Yeah.
reaches out to Stamkos. They're old buddies. They used to play together, and
Yep.
he's like, ho ho ho, I'm thinking about going to Nashville, and Stamkos is like, I'm thinking about going to Nashville, and they're like, we should go to Nashville together.
Yep.
Um, so that's what we didn't anticipate, but it all makes a lot of sense. And kudos to Barry Trotz, like you said, for
Totally.
pulling off the biggest moves of the day. Maybe the second biggest moves of the day. My beloved New Jersey Devils are a winner. Brett Pesce, 6 years, 5.5. Brendan Dillon, 3 years at 4. There's your defense, folks. There's two guys that are going to be able to play with your Luke Hugheses and your Simone Nemiches to give them the stability they need to go along with the time-tested Dougie Hamilton, Jonas Siegenthaler duo. They go out and get
Yep.
Stefan Nason. They make the Paul Cotter trade. And of course, before all that happens, they go and get Jacob Markstrom. So you get the two Jakes in goal, some veterans with your young D, and then up front, you're hoping that everything kind of actualizes and everybody stays healthy again. I'm liking what I'm seeing, Powers.
I don't know.
I
I don't
like what I'm
know.
seeing in Jersey, baby.
I don't know how you wouldn't. I talked to a couple Devils fans and they were upset about it looks like Marchessault. And I was like, how can you be upset? I mean, to go into a trade deadline and say we need defense and then you get two great defensemen, what more could you ask for? And you're so right. All the prior moves, I mean, the Devils get a solid A right now, and there's a chance that they're not done. I mean, you're hearing a lot about Ehlers, you're hearing a lot about maybe a Natchez trade, but it's such a good feeling when you are a fan of a team and there is a clear need and that need is addressed immediately. And that's exactly what the Devils did. Pretty
Yeah.
good stuff.
It's smartly addressed too. Like the Pesci deal
Yeah.
is just great. It's a great number for
It's a
him.
fantastic number for him.
Yeah,
I was
and
honestly, I was shocked. That's great work by Fitz.
a real good defenseman. My other winner, I mean, who's the best winger available on the market, Dan? It's Jake Guentzel. Who got him?
Yeah.
The Tampa Bay Lightning. I know at what cost, and I know that you're looking at that defense and wondering, okay, without Sergachev, what does it look like? But they got the best winger on the market. He's going to play with Braden Point and Nikita Kucherov. He's going to set
Yeah.
career highs in points and goals. I still have to make them a winner, even though I understand the cost for that win is something that's very hard for a lot of people, especially in Tampa Bay, to swallow.
Yeah, it's, with Reinert not technically getting to free agency, I think, yeah, clearly he is the best winger on the market. They went out and made a big move and got him. So respect. But yes, this is our Avengers Infinity War moment where I feel like Thanos is staring at Gamora saying, "At what cost?" And or what did it cost? And he says everything. Because watching Steve Stamkos get disrespected like this and move on elsewhere after just that insulting offer, it feels very bittersweet. I mean, if you're a Tampa fan right now, you got to be going, "We got Guentzel. This is amazing." But to watch Stamkos leave the way he did, that's the thing. It's not just that he's leaving, the way he left feels so sour. And oh man, it is one of those moments where it's like, you're right. That first line is so good now. Point, Kucherov, Guentzel, give me a break. I would not be, I'd be shocked actually if Guentzel doesn't hit 90 plus points.
Yeah.
So it's a great pickup. You're right. It's almost impossible to not call them a winner
So
despite what happened, but it's tough.
this is all going to turn out one of two ways, right? This is my Infinity War Doctor Strange moment where I'm putting up two fingers. It's going to happen one of two ways. One,
Yeah.
Julian Breezeball correctly identifies that he needs to be more like an unfeeling Vegas
Yeah.
Golden Knights franchise that cuts
Yeah.
ties with a beloved player as a wake-up call and as a mean piece of business to get a better player in place and a
Yeah.
younger player in place. Or Gensel struggles, everybody turns against him. Stamkos blows up in Nashville to the tune of 45 goals, and the whole thing is a giant mistake. It's going to go one of
Oh,
two ways.
you're right. And like both are very easy to imagine, right? It's like, I mean, God forbid if Gensel gets an injury or yeah, it just like doesn't work out. Oh my God, will the fans turn on Breezeball? It'll be full on anarchy.
Who's your other winner?
My other winner is you might call me a homer. It's Boston.
Oh,
I feel
right.
similar
Polar
to
pick.
what you said with Jersey. Boston had clear needs, right? They needed a center. They needed a marquee first line center. They needed help on D. They went to Vancouver and got two guys. And Lindholm is a guy that we had been hearing about with Boston since the beginning of last season. So it's kind of nice to see for once a guy that a lot of the fan base and a lot of people had thought this would be a great fit in Boston comes to fruition, is playing with Boston. I feel similar about the Guentzel and Tampa thing, putting a Elias Lindholm with a David Pastrnak and a Pavel Zacha on that first line just feels immediately like it's going to go well. I love Zadorov's size. I think they got them on pretty good numbers, maybe a slight overpay for the both of them, slight, but Boston has a good amount of money. I think just like a good situation for that team. Now, the one thing I'll say is when you look at all the players in Danton Heinen, Jake DeBrusk, and Derek Forbort going to Vancouver, and Zadorov and Lindholm coming to Boston, it's almost like these two teams should have just done a trade or something. But but regardless, I think it's hard to not call Boston one of the winners. They needed a center, they needed D. They got two of the best ones in both positions. It's a great feeling.
I like Zadorov saying, "Don't call me Big Z anymore" when he gets
Yeah,
traded
yeah,
to
that was
Boston.
cool.
When he signs with Boston, that's a good way to endear yourself to the locals pretty quickly. Look,
Right?
I feel like it's one of those deals of like they clearly needed a center,
Yep.
and they went out and got arguably one of the top two or three guys available at the position in free agency.
Yeah.
Now, when I saw these signings, I said to myself, I'll feel a lot differently about these if they go out and get Draisaitl next summer, as they'll be in service of something grander.
Yeah.
Um, but taken on their own right now, I think they're fine. I mean, I
Yeah.
understand that they don't really like shift the world off its axis as far as Boston being a contender, but they're fine.
Yeah. I mean, and it's like you look at the cap going up this year, hopefully going up next year. When you look at a guy like Zadorov and his age on a $5 million cap hit, that's great. You love that. And then 7.75 for Lindholm. If he has a season like he did in Calgary, playing alongside Kachuk and Gaudreau, a center making 7.75, putting up 80 plus points, you absolutely love that.
Yeah.
So I think they've got of a lot of hope with those two, and for good reason, which is great.
All right, losers for me. I'll go through them real quick. Seattle, Montour at 7 years at 7.142. Like, it's tough for me because I do think he's a really good offensive defenseman, and I really think that Seattle needs more offense from their blue line. I get a
Yeah.
little concerned about health, and I get a little concerned about term, but not as concerned as I am for Chandler Stevenson at 7 years at 6.25. That's the worst contract of the day. Like, this is a guy
It
whose
is.
best years are already behind him at 30. He
Yep.
hasn't proven that he can really drive any kind of a line himself. All of his best years in Vegas were courtesy of Misters Jack Eichel and Mark Stone. And I know he's
Yep.
going to have some wingers to play with in Seattle, but I don't trust it. I don't get that contract at all. Like, the only thing I can think of is they're going to move on from Yanni Gourde after next season, and then maybe you slide him into that position for the next 6 years after that. But just like a very odd contract for a guy that I think is at best a third line center on a good team.
I completely agree with you. I love Stevenson, but I do think that is a crazy commitment, both in term and in price tag,
And
because
here's the
of
thing too,
everything you just
like
said.
you, Washington doesn't have any state income tax. Like, we're all talking about all these. It's the biggest story of the day, really, is all these places that are thriving and
Yeah,
attracting
it's
players that
true.
don't have any state income tax. What's Seattle doing? Like, they're still giving out
Yeah,
$7
it's
million
like
over 7 years to Montour. Like, where's their
it's
discounts?
it's just like two wild contracts.
Yeah.
And yeah, the Stevenson one is it, you know, I remember when people were saying this about Guentzel, they were like, we've never seen Guentzel thrive without Crosby, but you could see it in Guentzel, and we then immediately saw it in Carolina.
Yeah.
This one, Stevenson, he's a good player, but you're right. Like, I think Stevenson is best in a third line role. So getting that contract, I mean, that's one of the biggest contracts on the team. And you're just sitting there scratching your head going, how in the world did that happen? It's
Bonkers.
crazy.
Yep, my other
Yeah.
loser is where Stevenson came from. It's Vegas. Marsh is
Yeah. I
so
like that.
gone. Again, the unfeeling Kelly McCrimmon move of letting a Conn Smythe winner walk to the point where he then tells TSN it felt like, they weren't really serious about ever keeping me. Logan Thompson gone at the draft. Now you're
Yep.
scrambling to find some sort of substitute to put behind Aiden Hill. No Stamkos. There was a lot of thought that Vegas was going to be the one to make a run at him.
Yeah. Yep.
Um, they didn't really do anything of anything positive. Now, I'll caveat this loserdom by saying it usually does mean that Vegas is going to do something cuckoo bananas. And by the time you hear this podcast, like Mitch Marner could be a Golden Knight. But
Yeah.
for
I was right
now,
what to say.
at the time of this taping, they're a loser.
Yeah. No, I completely have like they're going to trade their first round picks in 2030 and 2031 because I think that's the next time they have a first rounder, and they're
Right.
going to bring like a Marner or someone. It's you can never count them out. But I agree with you. As of now, they're losers. My losers. I hate to say this because I'm such a fan of the franchise, but Detroit. I thought that this
Ooh.
was going to be a big day for Detroit. And I loved that they brought back Kane. That was a good start, but they were one of these teams. They needed D, and there were good defensemen out there. Really, all they did, they bring in Jack Campbell and Cam Talbot, so they have like five goalies under roster right now. They have like five left shot defensemen. They brought in Eric Gustafson, and I look at that team and the needs that they had, and I feel like the appeal that they've got a great young crop of guys. The Iser plan is a very alluring thing. Playing in Hockey Town is very alluring. The fact that they got Kane back, I thought was going to be the first step in, okay, there's a movement here. And they just did
Yeah.
nothing impressive to me today. They
But if
haven't
you take
overloaded
all
those
those
positions.
goalies and form them into one Voltron-esque goalie, that
Yes,
goalie probably wins the Vezina.
we get like a Power Ranger situation where they just morph together into one being.
Right.
That's their only hope. But
Yes,
it's
a
like,
goalie
yeah, I
Zord
mean,
of some sort.
yeah, so there we go.
Who's your other
Uh,
loser?
my other loser is LA. My
Oh,
hometown LA Kings right now. I mean, they did nothing. I think they overpaid for Joel Edmondson, which was just not what they needed. Uh there's a hilarious thing when you look at right now the moves they made. They're currently paying more for Kemper and Edmondson than they were for PL. So like that was like their big move. And I think everyone in the Kings fan base and frankly, that front office is on the hot seat. And they needed to do something to get the fan base to go, okay, like we do have this great team. We're going to get back in the playoffs and get past the Oilers in the first round. And today was just not a good sign for any of that type of movement.
See, the problem I have with the Kings is that I have a little bit of Stamkositis. Like I wrote like all of the places that he could go, and like the Kings made a lot of sense for him.
Tons. I agree.
And then
I
like
totally
they don't
agree.
get him. They don't add anybody in that lane, and you're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
All
It's
right.
like they've just made all the wrong moves so far, so they're gonna have to scramble day two.
All right, Dan. Tell people where they can find your genius.
You can find me and CP, my brother, on Empty Netters on Instagram. We're on Twitter, TikTok, all that good stuff. Our YouTube channel as well. We're dropping 2 podcasts a week these days, covering everything in the NHL and elsewhere. Just having a blast, goofing around with great guys like you. So it's
Absolutely. Two painfully attractive people making hockey content. The world's better for it. And we'll talk to you soon, bud.
Sounds good, brother. I love you.
All right. My thanks to Dan Powers for coming on. Hockey's newest insider on hockey Twitter. Want to also mention 2 teams we didn't get to there. The Washington Capitals pulling off the Jakob Chychrun trade. What? For Nick Jensen and a third. I think that's one of those deals where like the value of Jakob Chychrun had been so overstated by local media in Ottawa. It'll take a third, a first, a third, a second, and a prospect again. This is probably what he was going to go for. He is a player of potential and not execution who is obviously going to walk to free agency next year. I think it's good that Ottawa got Jensen. I think it's good that the Capitals get Chychrun. And also want to shout out the Anaheim Ducks for having done nothing. The day started with people being like, maybe Stamkos goes to visit Killorn and Verbeek. And then they ended up not doing anything. So I guess another year of slowly building towards something in Anaheim. Anyway, Rachel Doerrie is, of course, at the Staff and Graph podcast. She is, of course, at ESPN.com, our draft guru this year. And we're going to talk about the draft. We're going to talk about the signing she loved the most on July 1st. And also some of the biggest news in the National Hockey League this season that happened to drop at like 4 in the afternoon on free agent day. Here's Rachel. All right, joining us now on the drop, it's Rachel Doerrie, who, of course, was the draft guru analyst for ESPN in the 2024 draft at Sphere. And also somebody who I wanted to get her opinion on all of the happenings on free agent day. But I guess first off, we should address what you and I agree is maybe one of the biggest news dumps in the history of hockey.
Oh, Mount Rushmore. Like, if you're building, not even like in hockey, it's one of the most ridiculous news dumps of all time ever. July 1st, busiest day of the season. Everything's getting lost on Twitter. Like, I didn't even realize Joel Edmondson signed until someone texted me and was like, so what's happening? And then I keep scrolling and I'm like, whoa, wait. The NHL choosing like 4 p.m. Eastern to reinstate Joel Quenneville and Al MacIsaac and Stan Bowman is
so
a choice.
Like your news dump is either coming on a Friday at like 5 when everybody's leaving for the weekend, or it's coming on the single busiest day you could imagine. So the NHL chose the latter. For an effective immediately, Stan Bowman, Al MacIsaac, and Joel Quenneville are eligible to seek employment in the NHL. It's been over 2.5 years since they've been ineligible after the fallout from the 2010, the allegations of the 2010 Blackhawks team in which their video coach sexually assaulted Kyle Beach. The NHL says, while it is clear that at the time their responses were unacceptable, each of these 3 individuals has acknowledged that and has used their time away from the game to engage in activities which not only demonstrate sincere remorse for what happened, but also evidence greater awareness of the responsibilities that all NHL personnel have, particularly personnel who are in positions of leadership. You'll notice in the release, Rachel, that none of the things you may be wondering, hey, what do they do? those aren't listed. Those will probably come out when all these people get jobs and have to do more scrutinized interviews. We should say that they can't be employed until July 10th.
Ooh.
And that might mean that the Edmonton Oilers won't have a general manager until July 10th. Heavy speculation. Stan Bowman is going to get that gig. I reached out to Jeff Jackson, their CEO and acting GM, did not hear back on that, but that might be the catalyst for all of this, is Bowman potentially being the GM of the Oilers. But what say you about MacIsaac, Bowman, and Quenneville all getting reinstated to seek employment in the National Hockey League?
There's a lot to be said. Like, first of all, I feel like a lot of this gets skated over because we're talking about Kyle Beach and John Doe too. But the reality of the situation is the NHL failed to acknowledge the fact that because those three gentlemen did what they did, it allowed Brad Aldrich to go on and be convicted of sexually assaulting a minor. And had they spoken up at the time, there is a fairly reasonable chance that that minor's life doesn't get altered forever because he probably doesn't go through that traumatic experience with Brad Aldrich. So I feel like totally skating by that on the league's part is pretty gross. But then you look at the hockey side of it, which is very obviously not important at all in the grand scheme of things. Toronto wanted to hire Joel Quenneville, so I would have to think that they're not thrilled that this happened, because they're like, well, wait a minute, how come we weren't allowed to reinstate him when we were interested in hiring him? Edmonton wanting, and let's call it what it is, Joel Quenneville's coaching track record is much better than Stan Bowman's GMing track record in terms of talent. Joel Quenneville is one of the winningest coaches in the NHL, so given the culture in the National Hockey League, I wouldn't be surprised if teams were interested in Joel Quenneville given his success. Stan Bowman has a spotty record at best as it pertains to decision-making at the GM level, and if I'm the Edmonton Oilers, I don't want somebody with a spotty decision-making record. I think that's potentially a bad idea. So it's a bad idea to reinstate them. It's a bad idea for Stan Bowman to be hired in a role of that nature, and I feel like this probably just could have been avoided by the league saying, you did something and you're not allowed anymore. That's it.
I think it's okay to say that. Like, I don't agree with some of my colleagues that had a problem with the nebulous lack of definition to what the suspension looked like. I didn't think that these people deserved to get a second chance in the league, to be honest with you. Like, you can still work in hockey and not work in the National Hockey League. That's a thing that can happen. My biggest issue with this, though, like, even if you're somebody who believes that these three individuals should be back in the National Hockey League, there's still active litigation against the Blackhawks. Like, John Doe 2 has a lawsuit that was filed in November 2023 against the Chicago Blackhawks. Like, God forbid anything else comes out in that trial, if it goes to trial, or in that case that further embarrasses any of these three people, then what have you done? Like to me, that was always the thing. As long as there wasn't an like a final chapter of the end written on the Blackhawks scandal, and there hasn't been, I don't know how you let any of these guys back into the league. But apparently they're coming back in the league, eligible to be rehired by someone. And to your point, Rachel, it was June 8th, I believe, the day of the first game of the Stanley Cup final, when Gary Bettman was asked about the eligibility of Stan Bowman and Joel Quenneville, and basically said nothing had been determined yet. And I mean, how many teams are looking for coaches at that point, right?
It just feels, it really, I hate to be the cynic, but it really feels like the NHL went, well, we're planning to reinstate them, but we definitely don't want the guy ending up in Toronto because that's a headache that we don't want and a PR mess that we don't want. So we'll just wait it out because they'll hire somebody else.
Yeah.
And then in Edmonton, as much as it's a Canadian media market, absolutely no one is going to sit here and say that there's more media attention in Edmonton than there is in Toronto. Those are very different scenarios. And let's face it, GMs don't talk as much as coaches do. Like Joel Quenneville, if he ever coaches again, is going to be meeting the media every single day. And
Yeah.
I would sincerely hope that the questions, maybe they don't go on for like 8-9 months, but they can't stop after the first press conference. Like that, it just is not. It feels like the league said, okay, it's time to let them back in. Let's do it when hopefully nobody notices.
Yep. And again, the thing about the teams is that now they can just rely on the NHL. They could say, hey, the NHL said it was okay, so don't blame us. And we'll see if the fan bases accept that. Let's get to your draft real quick here. You did not hand out any D's or F's. Why?
I was trying to be nice, I guess. I would say that, like, I don't think any team got a D or an F grade by how I graded.
Uh-huh.
Now, if we were doing grades based on the totality of their off-season moves, including today, there would be some Fs and some Ds handed out.
All right. I like it.
Because boy, howdy, were some decisions made.
I wanted to ask you specifically on the draft, two teams. One was an A+ for Utah. Tell me why you gave Utah an A+.
Yeah, I loved pretty much everything Utah did this weekend, and I liked a lot of what they did today too, but particularly on the weekend, if you look at it, it is, well, GMs will tell you, it's very hard to acquire top 4 defensemen. They acquired 2, like just at the snap of a hat. And it's amazing. Bill Armstrong and his staff have done a great job of accruing prospects and cap space and other draft capital because they weren't allowed to spend money. And now they have an owner that basically is like, please spend all of the money, but do so in a measured way. We want to be good. So he turns around, takes some of that capital, still has a ton of cap space and capital, but he acquires Mikhail Sergachev, who is a top pairing defenseman, John Marino, who is a capable second pairing defenseman. I loved that they didn't go with the safe pick and they went with Tija Ginla, who is a guy that's a competitive, nasty, like absolute serial winner. And I think he's going to be huge for them. And he brings an element to their lineup that they just don't have. They don't have that snarly, skilled player, right? Clinton Keller's not that. And so I look at some of the moves, then they use more of their draft capital to trade up and get Cole Baudouin. It was a little bit of a reach for me there. I think there were better players available, but I think they have a ton of skilled players, and he is going to be a solid middle 6 player for them. So on the whole, when you look at the trades, how they weaponize their cap space, how they weaponize their capital, and the picks that they made, I didn't have a single issue with what they did. In fact, I loved a lot of it.
How did the Flyers go from being so smart one year to being so bad the next year?
I wonder the same thing. I'm like, okay, if you're gonna trade down and not take Zeev Bouillon, don't be so transparent and say we didn't just come out and say we didn't take him because I don't want to deal with Kurt Overhart after the Cutter Gauthier incident. That is exactly what it was. Like, what are we doing here? They took Michkov last year when he fell. There's no reason they couldn't have taken Bouillon. And the reality of the situation is they could have taken Konsta Helenius, and he would have been great for them. That's a center prospect. And don't get me wrong. Jet Luchenko is a good prospect, but that was a reach. Like, man, at this point, if you're willing to take risks, like just take Trevor Connolly at that point and have Torts whip him into shape. Like, I don't know, if you're gonna trade back again. Luchenko would have been there at 20. Like, take the best player available. That is what you need in Philadelphia. And then some of the other puzzling moves they made, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, they were pretty close to getting a D, if I'm being honest.
Right, there it is. I knew somebody was close to getting it. And then real briefly, like today, what were your thoughts? What was a couple of the signings that caught your eye today on free agent day?
Yeah, I mean, over $1 billion US spent. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of
some
money.
of it even outside of Florida, Tennessee, and Nevada. I was pretty impressed.
Yeah. Who knew? Speaking of which, Florida and Tennessee, like the rich just get richer. Sam Reinhart signing for what is likely to be $4 million less than Mitch Marner is going to send people in the city I live in off the deep end. Honestly, Jake Guentzel, a fantastic deal. So I liked both of those. I think I loved the Anthony Duclair deal in Long Island. I thought,
Really? Tell me why. Because I saw the
yeah.
term and I'm like, that is the longest anyone's ever signed Anthony Duclair for.
Yeah, so first of all, I think Anthony Duclair, because he's been on a lot of teams, has this reputation of not being a good fit, not being a good teammate, not being XYZ.
Yeah, which is wrong.
Honestly,
Yeah.
that couldn't be farther from the truth. Like, and I think Lou Lamoriello saying I'm signing that guy to a long-term deal should probably quell all of those questions, because Lou Lamoriello doesn't sign terrible human beings. And so I actually really like that deal for the value. My model has it at over $2 million in surplus value per year.
Wow.
So I look at this and I'm like, that's a great deal. If you look at what the Islanders have, stylistically, it's maybe not a fit in terms of how the Islanders play, but the reality is the Islanders need to score, and the Islanders need some speed, and the Islanders need some pizzazz. And Anthony Duclair is all of that. And I think he brings an element that guys like Brock Nelson and Anders Lee don't have. And so I really, really liked this. And then you add the fact that, I mean, Cole Yzerman got added at the draft when he should not have been available for them to take. That's two moves there. Tremendous value for the Islanders.
I love the full circle moment of the team of Mike Bossy drafting the kid that's all score, no defense.
I know, it was great. So I look at Anthony Duclair, and I think that's one of the best signings of the day. And then I nearly had a stroke when I saw the Joel Edmondson and Chandler Stevenson deals. My brain hurts. That is not good. I think the Devils overpaid a little bit on Brendan Dillon. I think the Canucks went a little bit too far, like too long on Jake DeBrusk, even though I think the dollar number is fine. But overall, I think there's a lot of pretty good ones. The ones that I'm most scared about, I am sure that the Edmondson contract is bad. I am sure that the Stevenson contract is bad. The ones that are going to be interesting are the Boston ones, Lindholm and Zadorov. Those are going to be the most interesting to me to see kind of what happens there.
All right, 1 minute left. Did the Leafs do it? Are they going to win the cup now?
No, not even a little bit. I don't. Okay. I loved what Carolina did with Gostisbehere and Walker on the bottom pair, and I wish Toronto kind of could have gone that route. But I think a lot of people are making way too much of the Tanev deal. I think that's a totally fine deal for a top pairing right-handed defenseman who penalty kills and is excellent at defense.
It's also a deal that's going to be 3 years of play and then 3 years on Robida Island. Like, it's clear.
Yeah. Exactly. So the Leafs are not winning the cup with that core four. It is not happening, and I'm so sick and tired of it. But alas, I can't wait to deal with it for 6 more years or whatever the hell it is. Great job, everyone.
All right, Rachel, where can people find your stuff?
I'm on the Staff and Graph podcast. I am on ESPN, and I guess most importantly for a lot of people who follow me, the betting stuff is at betalytics.com. So if you want access to my models, that's where they live.
Trust me when I tell you, you're going to want to check out those models. I've experienced the joy of Rachel's genius in my own wallet now and again. Rachel, you're the best. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks to Rachel. Thanks to all of you for watching The Drop this episode and all season long. We very much appreciate it. Want to thank everybody who worked on the show this year, including my partner in crime, Ardo Cal. It's our final episode of the season. So until next time, friends, remember to search out NHL and ESPN on all podcast platforms from our archive shows or on YouTube. It's been a great run. It's time for your boy to take some paternity leave to be with sweet little Iris Wyshynski. And I'll see you at the start of next season. Take care, everybody.